the lesson that I learned here is, as you said, Daniel, the key to a successful sale of a business, merger of two businesses, is that the two owners need to like and admire and trust each other, because everything really flows from that. Just like in any business, the culture of a company really flows from the personality of the CEO. Throughout the whole process, it was a kind of feeling each other out, vetting each other, and then with the company, with employees, it was being honest and open with what's going to happen going here forward. And here's how you will be involved. Here's how you can make it better.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Having the skills of a marketer, I think it's a bit of a superpower. I thought about that while reading this lesson in a recent podcast guest application. Charge what it is worth, not what it costs. We've got all this talk about inflation lately, right? And it brings about this very basic view of economics and supply and demand, right? This idea that there are cost inputs and boom, that dictates the price. In a very roundabout way, yes, it informs the price, but really every company can only charge what a customer believes that product is worth. And in a free market economy without monopolies, what a customer believes it is worth is often informed by marketing. We are the ones who help potential customers perceive the value of a product or service, and therefore every person working in an organization has that job because we're able to teach customers what the product is worth. We'll discuss a great story behind that lesson, charge what it is worth, not what it costs, along with many more lesson-filled stories from our guest today, Jeff Bradford, the president of Dalton, Nashville. Thanks for joining me, Jeff.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Let's take a quick look at your background here. You started your career as a reporter. You moved into public and relations and marketing. You've been an agency owner where you were the only 7-time winner of the Nashville Business Journal's Most Admired CEO Award. Thank you. That's really fantastic. And you were author of The Joy of Propaganda, The How and Why of Public Relations and Marketing, a new book that's out. You sent me a copy. You know, Jeff, you sent me a hardcover copy. I really appreciate that. It wasn't the paperback, so I was like, okay, this guy, he's going to be a good interview.
At least not going to be cheap.
So let's look. Yeah, that's right. So let's look at it. You are, as I said, you're now the president of Dalton, Nashville, where you manage a team of 12 on 5 accounts. And Dalton was founded in 1989, has 100 employees, and is a $12 million agency. So, Jeff, give us an understanding. What is your day like as president at Dalton, Nashville?
Well, every day is a little different, but every day generally involves writing and thinking and making things happen. So, for instance, last week we were very focused on a little crisis. A client we had was some ground shifting literally beneath homes and not far away. We had to make that last just a day, which is that's our goal of all crisis management, right? Is to simply keep it to a one-day story. And so that was that day. Other days might be editing copy or press releases or white papers, or other days might be figuring out which reporter to pitch. It's a varied profession.
Okay, well, we've got an interesting story about crisis communication in just a bit in the podcast. But first, let's start with some stories from the things you made. And I want to start with this lesson here. Harness word-of-mouth marketing by making influential people feel special. So how did you do that, Jeff? Tell us a story.
So this was a case. We were hired by the Nashville Symphony to raise awareness and support for building a new $150 million concert hall in Nashville. The problem that we faced was people saw this as a somewhat elitist enterprise, and our goal was to truly show how it benefited the entire town. So we did that by creating a advisory council. We called it the Nashville Advisory Council, of about 300 community leaders. And these are leaders from across a broad swath of the city, leaders in real estate, downtown, the arts, religion, medicine, anyway, all the ways you could stratify a community. And then we would simply we told these people things that no one else know about this very dramatic building, and they told their friends. And these were because they were influential people and they were saying good things about our client. We succeeded in generating a pretty widespread support for this somewhat elitist structure as something that supports the entire city. We did things like when the concert hall is made of these large concrete panels because it has to for acoustics wise. And so we had the last concrete panel about 8 foot by 10 foot by 2 foot thick. People got to sign that panel and watch it be placed into place on top of the Symphony Hall. That was one of the experiences we gave to this group of influential people.
So give me a sense, when you're building an organization like this, what is the value proposition to them for joining? Like, why should they join? What is the value exchange? Because you're talking about 300 influential people in Nashville. Like, I'm sure they're busy people. This is not just a B2C lesson I had earlier on the podcast and in the B2B space. You know, someone telling us about before they launched an open source software product, how they got their open source community on board. So it wasn't just this company launching this product. It was this whole community behind it, this B2B open source software community.
What you gave them was really the opportunity to have prestige and recognition as someone behind a very important civic effort. So you gave them the ability to virtue signal, if you will, that, you know, hey, I'm involved in this important project. Let me tell you about how I'm involved in this thing, and therefore my personal prestige and image is heightened because of that. And that's what influential people want. They need to be able to distinguish themselves from the rest of the pack, and that's part of what it means to be influential.
So you made them look good. You're saying we're going to make you look good.
Well, we didn't say that, but yeah, that's what we did. We gave them a reason.
I mean, I think you communicated. Yes, obviously, no, obviously didn't say, but you communicated that to your.
That you are special. We picked you because you're special, and because you're special, you're going to be told things no one else knows, and we hope you'll tell your friends. Basically, it was that basic, and it worked.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the best way is to have a community sell the entire idea or product versus just having your company.
Marketing works because you have no reason not to believe your friend or your relative or your minister, someone who you know. You have no reason to believe that they have any other motive in telling you the truth, right? That's why word of mouth marketing works. And what we've discovered, and there's lots of psychology behind this, is that you can actually channel that stream of messaging, if you will, and it's very believable.
All right, great. So let's talk about another lesson. You hinted at this when I was asking you about your day. This is obviously something you've probably had to do many, many times in your career. You said handling a media crisis begins long before the crisis. So why does it begin long before the crisis? And maybe you got a story about how you've handled a crisis before.
Sure. Well, it begins by establishing credibility for yourself. That is, if you're the person, public relations counselor called in to handle a crisis, you're much more likely to succeed if you are known by the person who calls you in, and you're known by the media that you're going to be working with, and you bring to the party credibility that speeds things up, if you will, in the process. So that's what I mean by it starts long before the crisis. You're looking for an example of a crisis, then sure.
Yeah, let me before you tell that story, let me follow up on that, because I think that's a key point really for any public relations pitching.
Okay.
So, you know, I write for Marketing Sherpa. I get pitched all the time. And there's so many PR folks today. There are great PR folks too, of course, right? There's so many PR folks today that are focused on their message and their story and getting it in there and getting the right link back and getting that domain authority, right? And I hear a lot less that are focused on what I have to focus on every day is Marketing Sherpa's readers and Marketing Sherpa's audience. Right. Because they overlook the fact that if this doesn't serve the readers or the listeners of this podcast, it doesn't matter. I can write all day about your company. It doesn't matter. So tell me just a bit about that. You mentioned it's important for crisis communication, but I imagine that relationship building is essential to all public relations.
It is. And I write about that in the book, too, about how to think like a journalist. And what that means is what you're saying, Daniel, is that you're not selling them a story. You're helping them solve their problem, which is giving their readers interesting information that no one else knows that they care about, right? So, hey, that's a good pitch. Is don't care about my story, but hey, here's this cool thing of something happened your readers care about, and I've already lined up for you 3 people to talk with. Here's their phone number. Here's their email address, right? So it's to me, successful PR is helping a journalist solve their problem and helping them get the work done. And that's really, I think, the simple as it is, what public relations is about.
I mean, I'd say it's good marketing too, helping, not selling, right?
Right.
Let's talk about this crisis communication specifically. You mentioned it involved a dead racehorse?
Yes, probably the most dramatic crisis situation that we've been involved in. So our agency represented a horse race, the steeplechase, the Iroquois steeplechase, which is the second largest steeplechase in America in terms of size of purse. It's a pretty big deal, pretty big race. It's been going on for about 80 years now. Anyway, one day, the steeplechase is a series of 6 races throughout the day. It's a whole meet. The feature race is the Iroquois. This is the big stakes race. And one year, just as the winning horse crossed the line, it collapsed and died of an aneurysm. And so you can imagine the problem we were dealt with there. But we were able to successfully, basically, keep it to a one-day story. And we were, most importantly, we were able to communicate the message really throughout the whole thing, that it would have happened, that the horse did not die because it was racing, that it did not die because of overexertion, that aneurysms can happen when they're walking from one barn to the other or in the field. And we accomplished 2 things. We communicated a reason why this happened that did not reflect poorly on the organization who was our client. Right? A, and B, we kept it to a one-day story. This did not drag out over a week of uncovering yet another reason why this happened, or the nefarianism behind the organization itself. And we accomplished these things basically by telling the truth quickly and to everyone that we knew and answering every question we could that day. So there was no more questions to ask the next day, right? So we did it by being honest and open, which, as odd as it may sound to people who don't do PR, that's what crisis communication is. It's not lying and hiding things. It's giving people access to information that they want within a context that you provide, of course. So our context was an aneurysm is not caused by exertion. Aneurysm happens randomly at any time, and that's what this happened today. So that's that story.
Well, let me play the role of skeptical reporter for a minute, right?
Okay.
So, because one could also hear that story of, there's something bad that happened because of a company's product, and not surprisingly, the company's line on that is, it's not our fault, right?
Right, but we were successful because the second rule, I guess, of PR, that Edward Bernays, the father of PR, said years ago, was have someone else tell you the story for you if you want to be believed. So we didn't tell that story. The track veterinarian told that story, and very convincingly, as an expert on equine medicine, that this is what happens. So that's how we were able to assuage feelings that we were trying to hide or lie about something. We didn't tell it. Someone else told it who had credibility.
Yes, that's fantastic. That's what I was going to ask about, credibility. Either whether in your PR for crisis communications or in your marketing messaging, you can say whatever you want, right? But it comes down to the credibility.
Correct.
All right, let's talk about another lesson. I like this so much, I opened the podcast with it. Charge what it is worth, not what it costs. And you actually learned this, I think, not from someone in marketing, but from someone in entertainment. So how did you learn this lesson?
I did. I learned this from John Rich, country music star John Rich, who I don't know, is not a personal friend of mine, but whom we had a party at his house one time for a client. We had a 15th anniversary party. We got really knock out all the stops, have a big deal. And John Rich lives in a home that's kind of designed for this sort of thing, only he doesn't do it very much. Anyway, the long and short of it is we had a over-the-top event for this client that impressed everyone there. All the clients were there, all the prospects were there, and it cost a lot of money. But it was more than worth what it cost. That's what I mean by charge what it's worth, not what it's cost. That was really the image that we learned from John Rich, was that he didn't nickel and dime us. He didn't talk about every extra piece of shrimp he's going to have to buy for the evening. It was simply, here's the price, and I'm going to give you the best thing you've ever had in your life for this amount of money, and he did. So, rather than just him singing, he brought his entire band in and gave an actually an hour concert to a room of about 200 people. He personally had his picture taken with everyone there. He, spoke with everyone. It was a real experience. It's a lifetime experience. People remember the rest of their lives, and that's what it's worth.
Well, who approached who? Did you reach out to John Rich and said, "Hey, we're trying to do this thing"?
We reached out to John. We had I'm in Nashville, so these kind of things happen here. We had a contact in the music business who let it be known that he occasionally had used his house as an event venue, and for the right amount of money and the right terms, he would do it again, and he did. And he went the extra mile throughout the whole thing. We went over there and we spent the afternoon filming an invitation video that we sent out to everyone invited to the party. So it wasn't just a written invitation. It was, this country music star. Hey, I'm here to help this client DSI with this 15th anniversary party. Come out here, and he picked up his guitar and made up a song on the spot, for this video. So it was just, I guess what I'm trying to communicate is that, if you're going to do something, do it wholeheartedly and with both feet.
I hear that. And let me ask you too. So when we talk about this, I think there's a lot of perceived value here, right? So someone hears, you're using John Rich to help promote your event. Someone hears John Rich, there's a lot of perceived value. And I want to say a story real quick, but I want to get you thinking. How did you communicate that perceived value to someone, let's say like me, who isn't a big John Rich fan or would barely know who he is, right? Celebrity is a very funny thing. Celebrity to one person is very powerful. To someone else who don't know who it is, it's nothing at all. Just as an example real quick, I want to give you, we have a free marketing course. And in Fast Class number 12, our CEO, Flint McLaughlin, teaches, position the customer's gain as the direct object of the sentence, right? Position the customer's gain as a direct object of the sentence. And this is obviously, it's key for marketing. It's key for anything you're selling. But when we're talking about a celebrity, now we've got this thing, influencer marketing, where we've got these micro celebrities, right? That customer's gain is going to be so variably different if they are a big, for example, John Rich fan, or if, they don't really know who he is. So how did you use that? So you paid what it was worth. That's great. How did you use that to promote to people that also might not even know who this was?
That's a really good question, because really no one who we invited did not know who John Rich was. So I guess that's the answer to that question. We held this event during a time of a big convention in Nashville for people in this client's industry. So these were people already in Nashville because they wanted to experience the Nashville thing, right? Which is country music and that whole pizzazz. So you offered those people the opportunity to go have a party at the private residence of one of the most well-known country music stars in the country, when they're already wound up into that country music vibe. It was a no-lose. We didn't have the need to convince people that it was a big deal. I guess that's what I was trying to say.
Well, I think the lesson from there, and this is a challenge, right? Because if you are a brand big enough, I interviewed someone earlier who worked with major fashion labels and got Scarlett Johansson as the global brand ambassador for Louis Vuitton, right? Makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Right. But every small brand now even can use those, what we call influencers or micro influencers. And so from what I hear what you're saying, it's finding that right value for whoever you're going to hire on their value proposition as an individual celebrity, as an influencer, that's going to naturally align with your audience, where they're going to want to kind of slot into that without you having to do two things: sell the value of, oh, this is a great person you're going to hear about in this experience, and this is the value of our brand.
And it was also easy with Rich because he is an entrepreneur, and his message was very much in line with what the people who were at that party believed in, which is value propositions, seeing what the market needs and providing it, working hard and not giving up, and all those sort of things that entrepreneurs cut their teeth on. That was what he spoke about during this event. He didn't need to be convinced or prepped to relate to the audience. It was a pretty direct match.
That's That's awesome because, again, finding that right message is key to tie into your message. I went to an event once and I don't want to name the event or the celebrity because I don't want to call them out, but it was a marketing event. They had a name that wasn't their birth name. And when they were asked on stage about branding, they're like, I don't believe in branding. I just sing music and play really good music. And then they gave a speech about social justice and prison reform, all great things, but you had an audience of marketers who was really interested in how did this person create this brand and how did they do these things? And they had decided that they were a different thing this day and didn't want to talk about it, which they still played great music. It was entertaining for that sense, but my gosh, they didn't really, I don't think that organization got the bang for the buck they could have from that individual.
They didn't connect the audience. They were arrogant, sounds like.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, so you talked about some things with different brands you've worked on, with different clients you've worked on, but you yourself, let's talk, this story is more about you personally. As we said, you've owned an agency, now you're part of another agency, and I'll let you tell that story, but the main lesson is the most important thing when merging companies is the two owners should understand and trust each other. So can you tell us a bit about your journey? I mean, briefly, you built an agency, you got to the point of selling it. Take us from there.
Yes, so I built the agency, ran it for 20 years, and it was time to do the next adventure. So I decided to sell it. And in doing so, you do what you do. You hire a business broker to find people for you. And I talked to several different people. And the lesson that I learned here is, as you said, Daniel, the key to a successful sale of a business, merger of two businesses, is that the two owners need to like, admire, and trust each other, because everything really flows from that. Just like in any business, the culture of a company really flows from the personality of the CEO, at least in my experiences. Kind of the things the CEO cares about is what the company cares about. Well, when the two owners of two companies come together and they both care about the same things and are honest about how the deal is going to go, then it just goes really well. I mean, it's been 3 years since we merged the Bradford Group with Dalton Agency, and all of our employees are still here and happy. All of our clients are still here and happy, and we're growing because there wasn't any sturm and drang. There wasn't any drama between the two owners. We both agreed upon how we both agreed on what kind of culture made sense for the company. We both agreed on how to proceed. We both agreed on basic business philosophy. So yeah, that would be my secret to a successful merger.
Well, can you take us a bit into the room of how you did that? I'd imagine this is maybe a little bit, it's like one part dating or one part hiring someone, one part, all these different things. And you did it. I think most of this happened because I know you merged right at the beginning of COVID. So I think most of this happened when you could spend time together. You're in two different cities. So take us through, like, how long did this take? Did you visit, that agency? Did they come and visit you? Did you spend time together? Did you spend time with the employees? Did you talk about people they knew? Did you talk to their ex-wives, ex-fiance? What did you do to kind of get into the head and really, really sense that you understood people? Because I'll mention too, you were a PR exec all your life. You sit down and talk to Jeff Bradford, it's going to be engaging. You know what I mean? But like, how do you uncover that when it's two kind of marketers, PR guys, uncover really what's underneath there and really get to know each other?
Well, like you said, you spend time with each other. So Jim Dalton, the fellow who bought my company, we met here in Nashville probably 3 or 4 times over a period of 6 months. He would be in Nashville. He already had an agency here. He'd bought a small agency here already. So he was already had a reason to be here. And then, when we got serious, then I went down to Jacksonville, where Dalton is based, and met all of his key people and made sure that there was a good chemistry there. And then I went to the Atlanta office and did the same thing and make sure, and met with the senior people there. So yes, it was a sort of a dating process, if you will, but getting to know the people, make sure that you could look at them eye to eye, that they knew what they were talking about, that they were committed as you were. And then when we consummated this sale, then Jim Dalton came to Nashville. We had a meeting in the conference room with all the employees here. I said, here's what's going on, and here's our new partner. And he was very open and honest with them, and they were the same with him. So throughout the whole process, it was a kind of feeling each other out, vetting each other, and then with the company, with employees, it was being honest and open with what's going to happen going here forward, and here's how you will be involved, and here's how you can make it better.
So is that something too that are you communicating with the employees before this ever happens? They're like, hey, kind of here's where I am in my career. I'm thinking of finding, an agency to merge with, so I can kind of move on and step out.
You would never do that. I mean, you never want to tip your hand as you're selling your agency before your agency is sold. Yeah. No.
Okay. Yeah.
That tends to cause storm and drum in the marketplace. if the word's in the street, oh, the Bradford's for sale, then clients start heading for the doors and employees start getting nervous. So, no, you don't announce it till the deal is done.
Okay, great. So let me ask you, that's kind of a capstone of your career. I want to ask you about something earlier in your career, kind of how you started out. And I'm going to read just two little quick excerpts from your book. And I won't embarrass you by reading the whole book, but I do want to read these two little excerpts.
Go ahead, read the whole book. I'm fine with
that. That's part two. No, because one thing I've noticed is we have all this, everyone wants to be a thought leader now. Right. I mean, everyone wants to be everyone I hear from is a thought leader. They think they're a thought leader. They could be starting out. It could be their first day on their job right out of college. Everyone's a thought leader. And they have this idea. And I think it's right. It's not just in business. I think, we have this idea and we see it in bigger society. We see the Kardashians and all these people, and they have these careers that are built on just, I don't know. I don't even know if that is even being a thought leader. But so let me read you these two excerpts.
Okay.
Then I want to ask how you were a thought leader. And also I tie it into, I love what you're saying because it's kind of how I set up this podcast. So one thing you say, being a thought leader, you have to be an innovative thinker. You say, how do you become an innovative thinker? The process begins by reading a lot. My suggestion is at least 2 books a month, the New York Times and Wall Street Journal every day, 3 to 5 blogs of thought leaders you admire in relevant trade publications, and read widely outside your field. Read about many things that interest you, which will result in cross-fertilization from whence innovative ideas spring. So I really like that, talking about kind of doing the homework, doing the work it takes. I think that's something we see less of these days. Now, I just want to read on the other side of that.
Okay.
Here's the negative of what happens if you don't do that. You talk about jargon, which is way overused today.
I hate jargon.
And you say, watching someone use jargon in a business meeting or sales pitch is like watching a child curse for the first time. He doesn't really know what he is saying, but he's seen grown-ups say it, and it sounds powerful. And that's the downside when you try to be a thought leader before you are. So let me get a sense from you, just from your experience. What did you do? How did you build up to the point of being a thought leader, being an agency owner, doing these things? Sounds like you put in the work.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a thought leader. I'm a PR man. I think that is an overused term, Daniel. It's somewhat kind of comical. So how did I do it? Yeah, I did the work, right? And I think that's most entrepreneurs, most business owners. I'm sure you would say the same thing, Daniel. It's a matter of, as I think Thomas Edison or Edison said, I think, right? Success is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. That it's a matter of deciding what you want to do, of focusing, knowing. I think first it's a matter of discerning what you want to do, and that requires, I think, a larger education. To me, it was liberal arts who helped me do that. It was being able to understand culture and literature and art. But it's different things for the people. I think first you discern what is important to you, and then you focus intently on doing that thing. And I think when you do that, then the discipline simply arises as a result of that commitment. I think it's difficult to be disciplined without focus, right? Discipline, that means you're disciplined about what? you need a reason to be. So I think once you've done the work, and then when you focus, you realize, okay, in order to be successful at PR, I need to be a good writer. I need to know how to talk to reporters. I need to know how to convince them that what I have to say is worth listening to. I need to be able to understand how to explain to clients how marketing works and how stimulus response and medium works, and how do you each of those come together to make a successful public relations campaign. So yeah, you're doing the work. You're constantly learning, and that's what I like about my profession, about marketing in general, is that it requires you to be constantly learning. Because unlike more staid occupations, I guess, or those that are based upon using the same rules over and over again, marketing and public relations is about finding out what is new constantly and incorporating that into the mix that you're creating to get people's attention and cause them to do what you want them to do. That's what marketing is. It's making things happen, right? It's making people buy something, vote for something, go somewhere. It's action. So it's not just words and pictures, but it's creating a action on the other end of that process. That's kind of a ramble part.
No, it's good. You mentioned to do that, you need to be deeply knowledgeable about all of your clients' industries too. So when something is newsworthy. So when something is worthwhile, and that takes homework.
Well, you need to be knowledgeable about two things. You need to be knowledgeable about the industry that you're in, or the industry that your client's in. You need to be knowledgeable about the larger culture within which you move and live, because it's the interaction between those two things where things happen, where news happens, where diversity happens, where growth happens. Is when what you're doing interacts with what the culture is doing, and that's the foundation of public relations, really.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I pulled out that part of the book for two reasons, and I want to mention it specifically too, because it's how I specifically set up the How I Made It in Marketing podcast, how it functions. So the first part where you talk about essentially doing that homework, actually learning before you put yourself out as a thought leader and, seeing what you can do. Like, as you know, when I set up, people who come on this podcast, we have an application, and that application is all about their stories, right? Mm-hmm. And so people pitch me to have guests on here all the time. They're like, oh, it's the CEO of this or the CMO of this, and they'll be great. And I understand that's how PR guests are traditionally pitched. They're like, it's this person, they're this thing.
Right.
But, we have the application. It's like, what have you actually done? What have you actually learned and done? Teach us. It doesn't really matter to our audience who the guest is, right? It does a little, right? If they see someone, hey, that person's in my industry, I want to learn from them. Mostly what matters, my guess is, from people who listen to this, is that they can learn something, right? Yeah. That's what they got out of it. I'm going to learn something from the listener. So if you're pitching this, instead of pitching, hey, it's this person, pitch what have they learned and what can they teach, right? And that's why I love where you say, hey, if you want to be a thought leader, the first step is read the New York Times, read the Wall Street Journal, read all these influencers, read, learn before you can teach, right? But the second thing I like is when you talk about jargon, obviously incredibly overused. You use my favorite example in the book, scalability. My gosh,
what does that even mean?
What does that even mean? And the way that it relates to how we've set this up, and kind of we were talking in the beginning of this podcast before we recorded, is that's why we focus on stories here. I've heard so many podcasts. I've seen just so many different types of communication, marketing ads, where they're talking about the same industry jargon, be authentic, be real, whatever. And it's just, the same, and it just kind of washes over you. And it's something what I've written about. I've called it blandvertising, right? You've got to fill a certain space with copy. It all sounds right. All the right words are used. But when you stop and think, they didn't really say anything. And that's why we focus so much on stories.
There's no soul in it. Just reading about that recently, as a matter of fact. But the difference between sociology and mythology, which is what I talk about. And I believe that marketing is mythology, that is tapping into things that we know unconsciously and have known forever. And that's why mythology beats sociology, because it has a reason why. It has a direction it's moving in. It's not just a collection of facts that you talk about, but it has value, right? Something is better than something else. Yeah.
I like that. Well, and here's my theory is that is hard, right? It is hard to put in that work and get that knowledge and build to a subject matter expertise. And it's hard to find what I think you're talking about is a value proposition. So what we do is we kind of do the lazy thing, just refer to, okay, like, I've got this jargon, and I've started my career as a copywriter. I've had clients come to me and there's this ad that needs to be written, this thing that needs to be done. There's nothing really to say it about, right? So what I've said before about writing is it's 80% having the right thing to say and 20% saying it well.
Right.
So we just go back and we use jargon. That's why I love what you said, where it sounds like, that kid, they curse for the first time. They're saying those words, they've seen adults react, but they don't know what it means.
Well, I also like to say jargon is about pre-digested ideas. It's something already thought an idea, and it's been worn out over time. By the time you use it, it no longer has any juice in it. Like scalability, it's jargon for people who don't think. Basically, who simply just use words as a way to fill space, like you say, Daniel.
Yeah, I think also, too, in fairness, I was asked before by a non-native English speaker how they could become a copywriter. And what I said is, we're all non-native to begin with. So my career, I went from high-end real estate and some of those things. I went into B2B and software and technology, and I didn't know it at all. Right. And so one thing is, and I do think this is my, not defensive jargon, but where it comes in is, you need to be able to speak the language, right? You need to be, every industry has a language. Mm-hmm. But that's why I love what you say. Like, if it's off a bit, people sniff you out pretty quickly. And that's where your analogy is so great about the child cursing. It's just off a bit. It doesn't seem right. I'll give you one just quick example. And you're welcome to share an example. We can move on. I want to spend all day on this. But
Sure.
we have here we use a CRM and an email platform, marketing automation platform. I won't mention the company. I'm not trying to, but we use basically one of the biggest companies in the space. The other biggest company in the space, I had a sales call with them. We're interested in talking about it. And the sales rep kept using that term, scalability. And he just kept using, I was trying to figure out what he was talking about because again, we're using one of the biggest companies in the space.
Yeah.
It is cloud-based. It is infinitely scalable. We just need to pay more money if the database grows. And he kept just throwing around scalability issues and this. And so, at one point I just stopped the conversation and I asked him, I said, I have an understanding of what scalability means. What do you think scalability means? Because I don't think we're on the same page. And at the end of the day, I'm not trying to out him. I feel bad.
I don't think your word means what you think it means.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Inconceivable, yes. That's exactly right. And so what I think with jargon is it's a two-edged sword. It's one, when I came into the technology and the software industry, man, I did the work. I read eWeek, I read Wall Street Journal, I read all these things, and I talked to some of the smartest people in the company. One of the companies I worked with was IBM, and I wanted to know and understand because I wanted to be fluent in that language. But on the flip side, boy, if you don't know it yet and you try to use it, you will sound like the toddler that's cursing. and everyone just laughs.
There is good jargon and bad jargon, right? So jargon in its purest sense is actually good writing and good thinking because it economizes a whole way of hundreds of words into a couple of words, right? So in the book I talk about the concept of consubstantiality, for instance, is jargon. But if you're a Catholic, you understand it, right? It in one word it encapsulates something that would take about 400 words to explain. But use that term and down at the pub and you looked at like an idiot. So you have to use jargon in its content. If you're at a tech conference, you need to be able to talk about acronyms that make sense to them. But my main beef is with jargon in the managerial profession, which is not about communicating a tangible thing like it is in technology, but it's about obfuscating, really, what you're not doing. Or it's about talking about vague concepts that have nothing to do with reality, but they somehow get you through a meeting, or that somehow get you on the next desk up in the bureaucracy. But it's not about making something happen in the real world. That's my problem with jargon.
And it's not about actually communicating, right? I mean, that's what
actually it's the opposite of communicating.
Right.
It's obfuscation. Yeah.
All right. Well, in the first half of the podcast, we talk about lessons from the things you made. That's what we do as marketers, as PR people. Uniquely, we get to make things. I've never been an auditor or a podiatrist or something, but I don't feel like they leave every day having made things. We've made brands, we've made companies, we've made products. We made things happen. In the second half of the podcast, we talk about lessons from the people we collaborated with. It's another great thing we get to do is work with people, collaborate with people. Your first lesson, you say, think big. And you learn this from Alan Valentine, the CEO of the Nashville Symphony. So I think this kind of goes back to that original story we were talking about building that symphony hall. How did you learn from Alan to think big?
Well, because he did. So he came to the Nashville Symphony at a time when it was not a very well-known national orchestra, when it was playing in a second-rate concert hall, and when it wasn't that big of a deal. But he had a vision for it to be one of the best orchestras in the country, and he had a vision that it would go to Carnegie Hall, and he had a vision that they would build one of the best concert halls in the world. And he did all those things. And I think it was really just through his force of personality. No, let me take that back. I think it was just simply through his fervent belief that something could happen, that it affected other people. And it's about, there's another story in the book about Russian propaganda, and one of Russia's best techniques is to invent a reality and insist that it exists. They did this in the Ukraine, for instance. They invented a part of Ukraine that they called Russia and say that it now exists. Well, I think that's what people who think big do, though, that they invent a reality. They talked about Steve Jobs' reality distortion field, for instance. Steve Jobs invented a reality that we needed to be able to look at a phone and have it do these sorts of things. And it happened, and it succeeded wildly. Alan Valentine, the CEO of the National Symphony, saw the reality of a world-class concert hall. Then he took the orchestra to the Carnegie Hall to show people what a world-class hall sounds like. So what he did was he took basically all the wealthy people in town, went to New York one year and heard our symphony play in Carnegie Hall. And he came away and said, see, that's the difference. Because they couldn't understand what's wrong with our concert hall. It sounds fine to me. Well, when they heard what it could sound like, then he was able to transfer his reality to their heads, if you will, right? He's able to say, that's what could happen here. Now let's go make it happen. And that was inspiring, and it worked. And within 6 years, they had a new $150 million world-class concert hall.
Well, in fairness, you also mentioned Elon Musk in the book, which I think is probably the more positive example.
Elon is the same sort of guy, right? I think he is successful. Think about Elon, who has done some remarkably stupid things, who is autistic, who is off the charts, just kind of weird, but he's successful. He's treated as sort of a lovable mad scientist because he thinks big and he accomplishes big things. He just doesn't brag. He actually, like you say, Daniel, does the work to make big things happen. And I think people are attracted to that. I think they're attracted to people who see things differently and who have the focus and the dedication to making them happen.
Well, and I think there's a lesson there for all leaders, listening. It's not just enough. Again, I say the worst ads are ever written is it's okay, we've got this space. We bought this space in the newspaper, now fill it with an ad. And so that's what we're talking about. And so backing up from that, the worst marketing plans are marketing plans for something that's not really a good strategy. And so it begins with, like you said, think big. What is I've heard it called the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? What is that? Where are we driving the organization to? Then marketing comes in with great things like value propositions and plans and messaging and communicating. But you need that vision, and I think personally, if you're looking for it from your agency or your copyright or whatever, you're looking in the wrong place. That is the soul of an organization.
I think you're right. You're right. It needs to come from the organization itself. It needs to come from deep within the organization. Right.
Absolutely. All right. You also mentioned, here's another lesson. Well-crafted video can shape perceptions by connecting emotionally with your audience. And you learned this from Stan Nowak, the vice president of marketing of Red Hat Holdings. So how did you learn this from Stan?
Actually, it's a Red Cat.
Oh, sorry, Red Cat? Red Cat Holdings. How'd you learn this from Stan?
Well, by seeing him do it. So Stan is a relatively recent joined Red Cat, which is a military drone company. And he came to the organization from a marketing background, but also from a film background. He had a lot of experience in Hollywood. And so he brings that sensitivity that a cinematographer brings to marketing, which you probably see, Daniel. That sensitivity is being able to understand how you can communicate beyond words. How the tilt of the head, the way light reflects off something, the way something is set up, the pause between words. How those things communicate just as well as the words on the page communicate. And I think that it takes that cinematography sensitivity to understand that. And that's what I mean by well-crafted, emotionally connected videos. It's not just the script itself that's well done, because there was no script. What he was putting together is what I saw happen with Stan in Salt Lake City, and the whole day of filming was really just talking to people and filming it, but being aware of what they were saying, being able to pick up on the subtle cues throughout that day.
Well, I think that helps communicate a message, but I'm going to ask you in a second about how to identify that right message to communicate to the video, right? Like kind of almost that instructional element of the video. And I'll give you an example real quick while you're thinking. There's something we talk about is the prospect's perception gap, right? So we as human beings, we have a difficult ability to perceive value, right? So one example is I'm here in Jacksonville, and one client I had way back in the day, there's this beautiful, huge community. It's called Queens Harbor. It's yachting and golf and all these things. But when you drive up to Queens Harbor, when you see the entrance is like Versailles. I mean, it's this amazing entrance. It's amazing,
Dalton had its anniversary party there in the last couple of months ago.
Yeah, and so you drive up and it's like Versailles. And so now when you get actually into that community, it could be mobile homes or trailers. Like, you don't know what it is. And you can't, even if it's nice homes, like, we're not smart enough if we're buying a home to know, like, okay, that's the structural integrity of the home or the real 10-year value of a home I buy here, or all the things that are actually the true value of finding where to buy a home, or how will my neighbors be? What will it be like to live here? What's the air quality? All these other things, right? But what we can drive up and see is like, this is an amazing and beautiful entrance. I can tell that. So when I drive up, I will get a sense there must be something good inside. Or once I buy the house, when my friends drive up, they'll be impressed, right? Again, so we can't perceive value. So we take that as a shortcut. We look at that amazing sign, and then we consider that for whatever value we really should be considering, like how well the home is built or, whatnot. So when it comes to video, I think video is kind of doing the same things for the customer, right? It's kind of trying to close that prospect's perception gap, right? So you talked about a military client. Go ahead.
I think what you're talking about, Daniel Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. I don't know if you've read that or not. And he talks about, it's actually a pretty old idea, that we have two ways of thinking. One is the automatic, instinctual way that we will make most decisions by. And we use visual, auditory, even olfactory clues to do that. And the other is, I guess you call it thoughtful thinking, right? Where we actually step back and consider, like you're saying, is the home well built? Is this the details of this situation actually bear out the impression that it gives? And I think that's what I think good marketing knows how to tap into the levers in our brains to think in level one, really, to use our instincts to help cause people to act the way that we want people to act. And I think video is particularly good at tapping those level one levers, if you will, because it does communicate on more than just the auditory level, because it does engage our sense of sight and our sense of myth and our sense of story, which is what level one taps into. Level one thinking taps into myth and story and wanting to be part of something larger than yourself, and really just instinctually moving towards something. So, that's what I think video does. It taps into that sort of emotional thinking.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think what Kahneman taught or discovered was even when we think we're making decisions because of level two thinking, it's actually because of that level one thinking. And so I think as marketers, go ahead.
Well, right, that we back rationalize our decisions. In other words, they're like, as you know, all decisions are emotional, all buying decisions are emotional decisions. But we then overlay that with a rationalization of why we did something. Oh, well, I bought this red Corvette because particularly this car has these kind of specs and this sort of thing. But we bought it because it's a beautiful car and we wanted to have it,
Yeah, and also partly too, we wanted a person to think a specific thing when they saw us driving up in it, right?
We want to be seen in a particular way, and our possessions typically are clues how we want to be seen.
And so I think a great lesson for that, for me as a marketer from that always is when we're communicating, especially through something like video, when you talk about some of the emotions that come through it, or really any of our communications, what real value are we delivering? And what signifiers can we use to communicate that value to get that message through to someone? So, for example, if the real value we're delivering, like when someone's buying a Corvette, isn't necessarily that this is a reliable quality automobile or whatever, but it is you will be seen as a cool and successful person when you drive up, how can we communicate that? Is it having, I don't know, Brad Pitt, driving up in the car and stepping out from it, right?
Cool, successful people drive in the car. That's pretty old, right? That's a pretty tried and tested tactic. Exactly.
Yeah, and so for anyone's product, whether it's B2B or B2C, B2B, sometimes the thing that we want people to understand is you won't get fired for making this decision, right? It's not really that.
Which is another emotional decision, right?
Right, that it's just about the technology. So that's just something to consider when you're saying your own messages. Think about that prospect's perception gap. Think about what Jeff's talking about as well is what is the customer really buying? What value do you really need to communicate? It might not be the speeds and feeds.
It's just benefits and features, right? These are old ideas. I mean, right? You sell benefits, not features, right? So benefit is how does this product make you feel? A feature is what are the things the product does that, has these switches, this color. No, you want to sell how it makes you feel.
Well put and well summed up. Not a new idea, but I will also say, I will quote Stephen Covey and say, common sense is not always common practice. And I often see features, especially in B2B, promoted a lot more than benefits.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Just real quick on that, though.
Sure.
Look at the difference between that it's not as bad today as it used to be years ago. But packaging for an Apple peripheral versus a Microsoft peripheral, there used to even be a joke about it that the Apple package is very sleek and communicates an emotional connection of, I don't know, aesthetic beauty, of peace, harmony, and whereas the Microsoft package communicates features, this amount of RAM, this amount of ROM, this amount, these X number of ports, which has nothing to do with satisfying your desire for anything, right? To me, that's the real dichotomy there between those two companies.
And who has the higher margin and more cash than anyone else in the world, right?
Right, exactly. They sell the machines for a premium because they're tapping into archetypical needs. I actually write a chapter in the book about this, about why technology needs English majors. It's because English majors like me, like you maybe, we sell the myths that these products need to be bought by people.
I'm glad you said this. So I want to actually pull out one other thing from the book, and I want to ask your thoughts real quick about a specific technology. I don't know if you've seen some about ChatGPT or some of this generative AI. Yeah, and I've heard some things about how, and maybe I'm taking this a little personally because I'm a writer, like, how we will not need writers anymore because, the AI is going to be able to write some stuff for us. And what I thought was really interesting about your book, too, is you have many chapters you have about PR, marketing, all sorts of things, but your first set of chapters, your whole first set of stories is about writing, right? It could be, for an agency owner, it could be about finding clients. That would be a sensible, first set. It could be about, a lot of things, running an agency. Your whole first set is about writing, and you get deep into Norman and Anglo-Saxon words and all these things. But I want to just mention this also, this quote. First, as this book notes more than once, good writing is simply good thinking made visible. The process we follow when we write well is very similar to the process of thinking clearly, and clear, organized, and honest thinking is behind every successful marketing effort and anything done well for that matter. So I just want to get your thoughts. There's this buzz now about AI that it can write for you. Do you even need writers and designers anymore? The AI will create everything. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. I think it's kind of scary. I've test-driven ChatGPT, as I'm sure you have too, and was astounded at how lifelike it was. It's the best way to say it. But upon reflection, I think that you're right. I think it's like you said earlier on, Daniel. Sometimes copywriting is just filling in blanks of space that you've purchased. I think that AI-produced copy, at least for now, is that sort of filling in blanks of space that you purchase. I don't think it has a soul or a spirit or an animating idea behind it. I think it can mimic that because it does organize thoughts into logical sequence that 1, 2, 3. Here's these three supporting arguments, but it doesn't have that. What would you say? The animating spirit, that passion, the overarching soul of something that human-produced writing does. Now, who knows? I think it could possibly get there, but it's still what AI cannot do is decide what's important and what's not important, and that's I think what humans will always do. Hopefully, if we get beyond that, then we will ourselves have become automatons. If we get beyond making ethical decisions based upon fundamental values, then we are machines, I think.
That's well put. Yeah, we're just following an algorithm ourselves.
Right.
So.
Ourselves, we're just like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it comes down to, as you mentioned, think big, is if you're the CEO of a company, you cannot outsource your reason for being. You're, as the French say, raison d'etre. You cannot outsource that to your agency. And if you are the CMO and the marketer or whatever in the marketing organization, yeah, I think, like I said, 20% of writing is saying it well, and maybe use AI to help say that stuff well. But you cannot outsource determining what your value proposition is and some of these fundamental questions that you essentially answer. I know for me personally, when I'm trying to figure something out, I start writing. I'm writing a landing page, I'm writing an email, I'm writing an article. I start writing. That's how I figure it out.
I think AI-generated copy will become a tool rather than a threat. So I've talked to some friends of mine who are in who are academics, and I say, how are you going to grade papers going forward? How do you know if it's written by a person or a human, or a bot? And they said, there are already programs online to solve that. He said what he said that was interesting to me was this: I think we'll get through this just like math got through the calculator. So so the calculator became a tool to enable math teachers to do more than they could do before. They could teach their students higher level concepts because the rote work, if you will, was taken care of by technology. I think that's how we'll see IA-generated copy going forward. It will be a tool to enable us to do things that we couldn't do before. So I'm optimistic that I think the humans will still rise above these tools and use them to think in ways that we couldn't think before. And that's very exciting to me, Daniel. So sort of all the rote work, if you will, of the hard work of fundamental thinking is done by AI, and then you're able to take it to the next level of discerning what's worth doing and what's not worth doing, right?
I like that calculator analogy. That's a really good analogy. I mean, one thing I've always thought too, it's the paintbrush, it's not the painter. And just one quick anecdote, and then we'll move on to your next story. But we're doing a wrap-up article on Marketing Sherpa about, hey, what did you learn from Marketing Sherpa this year? And we had earlier on the How I Made It in Marketing podcast, one marketer talking about, we're such a data-driven, marketing has become so data-driven. How do you understand the human element where you trust your gut and where you actually make decisions? It's not all about data. He said it was really helpful to him because they were creating content, they were doing content marketing, and they were being very data-driven content marketing. And then they realized, well, all their competitors were as well, right? Because everyone had access to the same data.
Right.
So they're all just doing the same thing. And so they didn't differentiate. And that's when they realized this is kind of where the human component comes in, where we have to come into it and decide like, okay, well, here's the data, here's what customers want. But what do we want to be and how do we want to say it? And how do we want to have that unique value proposition, unique brand, not just the same thing everyone else has. Because it'll just be an AI arms race. We'll all be doing the same thing the AI is telling us. Exactly. And just spending more on the Google ads or whatever.
And then you'll pretty soon you'll have AI reading the AI copy and the humans are out of it all entirely.
Yeah, it's like there's that Disney movie where everyone's just so lazy because the robots do everything with that WALL-E, that cute little robot WALL-E. I don't know if you ever saw that. And the humans have become so lazy they can't even walk because the robots do everything for them. They just float around eating and watching movies.
Yeah. That's scary.
All right, let's take a look at one final lesson from very early in your career. You mentioned the manner in which you present your message and the environment in which it is presented is just as important, if not more so, than the content of your message. And you learned this from Hal Kennedy, the late CEO of Holder Kennedy Public Relations. So how did you learn this from Hal?
This is a great story. So Holder Kennedy is sort of the PR firm in Nashville, if you will. Everything sprung from this agency. And Hal was one of the original PR men in this part of the country. And he was a character, like all the early PR guys in this town. Hal was from Texas. He always wore cowboy boots. He always had at least one gun on him at all times, at least one in his boot, sometimes a shoulder holster as well. He was constantly smoking. He drank like a fish and was a philanderer of epic proportions. He was a man who lived very large. He actually had on his desk. He had two things. He had a pillow on the couch in his office that says "a 45 beats a full house," which is just this big Texas thing. And on his desk, he had a placard that says, "Thank you for holding your breath while I smoke." So that was Hal's take on the thing about this. This is a PR guy who you think everyone's supposed to be, very, non-offensive. Anyway, long story short, so Hal was a genius at PR. He had a little knack for understanding how to read a market and how to manipulate a market to make them do what you want them to do. He was hired by the Chamber of Commerce around in the 60s when Nashville was having a wet-dry referendum. That is a referendum on whether you'd be able to serve alcohol by the drink in Nashville. The Chamber was behind it because it was slowing the city's restaurant and dining industry not being able to serve a glass of wine with dinner. Was, kept Nashville in the dark ages. So Hal was hired by the Wets to get this thing passed. The day before the vote, the local Channel 5 station gave both sides 30 minutes to present their case to the citizens of Nashville, and they gave Hal the chance to choose whether he wants to go first are second. Now, normally, Daniel, PR advice is go last, not first, because the last is the most likely to be remembered by the people who saw the presentation. But this time, Hal chose to go first, and so he proceeded to run his 5-minute spiel about why you should vote for liquor by the drink in Nashville, and then he instructed the station staff to run the most boring public service 25 minutes segment that they could find for the remainder of his time. So what happened was, Daniel, people all over Nashville saw his 5-minute video and then simply switched channels after that because this boring content came on and never saw the opposing side. And as a result, and the Wets won, and the rest is history, I should say.
Very clever. So yeah, sometimes better strategy is just better. I like that. All right, let's ask. So we've talked about all different things about what it means to be a marketer. So let me ask, if you had to sum it up, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
I think the first key is empathy. I was listening to a podcast of someone else this morning, as a matter of fact, talking about that capitalism is often cascaded as a selfish philosophy. That capitalism is about doing what's best for you. But what this person said was, no, actually capitalism is about making the customer happy. And that means that you have to be able to empathize and sympathize with the customer in order to make them happy. So really, the business and what we do for a living, Daniel, is about thinking about other people, as odd as that may sound. But being able to empathize with people, I think, is the number one criteria for being a good marketer. It's the same thing. It's the number one requirement to being a good writer as well. If you don't care about your reader, if you're trying to impress your reader versus inform your reader, you're doing them a disservice, and they're not going to be read. Again, you have to do what the other person cares about, and you have to understand what they care about, and then be able to translate that back to them, right? So I think that's the number one thing you need to be a good marketer. And the other thing that you need, I do think, is writing ability, because I think writing is good thinking, and I think being able to organize your thoughts in such a way that you can see a beginning, a middle, and an end, and can help people traverse that journey is the secret to marketing. It's moving people from point A to point B, and you need to be able to communicate well to do that.
Well put. Empathy, one of the most important things to be a good marketer. Probably also one of the most important things to being a good human being, too. So I think that sums it up well. Yeah.
I think so.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. Thanks for sharing your career with us. I learned so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.